Ladies and gentlemen, for one reason or another, some weapons just don't seem to get a whole lot of traction in Destiny 2. Leviathan's Breath has always felt like one of those weapons. Since it was released in Shadowkeep, I've personally been a fan. I like the feel, I like the function, and I always thought it did a good job at what it was designed to do. Not everyone shares the same sentiment though. I was curious, so I looked at the PvE usage rate for Leviathan's Breath on Destiny Tracker, and over the last month, this weapon is sitting at number 187 on the charts, which is not so great. So, what's the issue here? Is Leviathan's Breath underperforming in the current sandbox? Are other weapons just outperforming it? Or is this a weapon that's holding up better than the usage rate would suggest? I think the best way to answer that question is with a full and objective weapon review. But if you do end up finding this video useful, helpful, or enjoyable, feel free to leave it a like. And consider subscribing to the Ironworker Gaming channel if you feel like the content is worthy of your support. But let's get into the review with a look at the stats and perks for Leviathan's Breath. Leviathan's Breath is an exotic void heavy combat bow with a lengthy draw time of 1328 and a base 10 arrows in reserves. The inventory size on mine is pushed up to 15 through the exotic catalyst. Taking a look at the stats, we'll pull in some solid numbers from Destiny Tracker. Leviathan's Breath has some really strong marks in accuracy, and that's about it. The stability's not great, but given the long draw time, it's kind of a non-factor, but the handling and reload speeds are rough. The aim assist of 66 is acceptable, and the recoil direction, here again, isn't gonna come into play really. The intrinsic trait is Big Game Hunter. Fires a massive heavy bolt that stuns unshielded combatants. Strong against unstoppable champions, so this has an unstoppable mod built right in. The exotic perk is Leviathan Sigh. When fully drawn, the bolt creates a large concussive blast that knocks back combatants. We'll be taking a look at all that stuff in the next section. But if you don't have Leviathan's Breath yet and you would like to get your hands on it, you can purchase it directly from the Legacy Weapon Kiosk at the tower. If you own or have access to the Shadowkeep expansion, and you have the appropriate currencies and materials, it's all yours. For the exotic catalyst, the drop source listed in-game is defeating powerful enemies with this bow. This catalyst took forever to drop for me, and when it did, I offed a major servitor in a lost sector with Wish Ender. So maybe deep within the spaghetti code, any exotic bow works? I don't know. But anyhow, let's move on to the PvE section and take a look at the damage, functionality, and performance for Leviathan's Breath. Alright, we'll get our functionality aspects out of the way first. For the draw time, we are looking at 1.33 seconds with Leviathan's Breath. So, Bungie is pretty spot on with their timing in the description. Releasing the arrow just after a full draw will result in maximum damage, just like with any other bow. This is otherwise referred to as a perfect draw. A late release or an early release will result in decreased damage. But if you're a hunter and you do have Oathkeepers, lucky you because you can hold that perfect draw indefinitely. Some bad news though. The Arrow Reserves mod would not allow me to carry any more than 15 total arrows in reserves. Also, something that we covered in my Ariana's Vow review. Seasonal artifact mods will not allow any weapon with intrinsic anti-champion abilities to pull double duty. Overload Bow right now isn't a seasonal artifact, and this is not going to allow Leviathan's Breath to disrupt an Overload champion. So, Unstoppable yes, Overload no. But when looking at the blast created by the arrow, it's always going to do a consistent amount of damage. It doesn't matter if your arrow is perfectly drawn or overdrawn, the damage will remain the same. An early release though will result in no blast. The blast radius that we're looking at here is approximately 8 meters, and damage will diminish out from the point of impact. Enemies that are damaged but not killed by the blast will receive that knockback effect. And the impact from the blast itself will hard stagger enemies, and this can serve as a very effective interrupt. Alright, damage time, and as always, PvE damage numbers are variable and will change depending on the scaling of the content and even the tier of the enemy. I've been doing all my damage testing this season in the Conflux Lost Sector on Nessus, so if you want to compare your notes to mine, this is where I'm at. So, a perfectly drawn crit with Leviathan's Breath will score 61,070 points of damage on our good friend Carl the Colossus, totaling up both the blast and the impact damage. With a perfectly drawn body shot, we will see 39,324 points of total damage, which isn't a massive drop, but you definitely do want to land your crits. Using a sample size of 3 arrows, it takes roughly 6.9 seconds to fully draw and fire off all 3, and leave me a little bit of wiggle room there for human error. But our max potential DPS against Carl comes in at 26,522. But since damage numbers are variable, they really don't mean much without a point of comparison. So I wanted to measure against two other burst damage leaning heavy exotics that are accessible to the bulk of the player base. With Two-Tailed Fox, we're firing 2 rockets on a single trigger pull. This damage totals out to 97,314 for the blast, the impact, and the burn damage. I'm able to fire off 3 pairs of rockets in about 9.4 seconds, putting our single target damage per second at 31,057. Sleeper Simulant deals 61,583 points of damage on a crit, and has a slightly unfair advantage here because it has a 3-round magazine. I was able to fire off 3 shots in 4.1 seconds. So damage per second here is 45,258. These 3 shots will be followed by a reload though, which over time will chew away at that DPS value. And there's absolutely a lot more that you can factor into overall damage, sustained damage, as well as overall usability. But hopefully this gives you a good general sense of where Leviathan's Breath is sitting. So, why would we want to use Leviathan's Breath in PvE? First off, it does deliver solid single shot damage. Not the best, but it is pretty good. And you don't need to reload this weapon. There is a reload time associated with knocking another arrow, but it's not a weapon where you're going to have to duck behind cover for an extended period of time to load more rounds in. Also, we do get a blast on impact, and while not incredibly powerful, it can down some trash ads in the proximity of your primary target. If you do have the catalyst unlocked and applied, this means orb generation. Also, Leviathan's Breath will stagger any unshielded combatant, which can be extremely useful for interrupting a damage stream, such as an Ogre Eye Blast. Plus, with the Catalyst, we are getting 5 extra arrows in reserves, and while many players I talked to would have rather seen a reduction in the draw time, this is allowing you to carry an extra 300,000 points of damage in your back pocket, if we look at the Lost Sector damage profile. Then, it's always nice to have a weapon that has an intrinsic champion mod built in. First, you can cover all 3 champion types with weapons alone if you need to, since you can only socket 2 champion mods on your arms. Second, there's typically only one heavy weapon champion mod featured in the seasonal artifact. Here in Season of the Chosen, we're looking at Disrupting Blade. It's 6 energy. It's expensive. Leviathan's Breath is going to be an ever-ready anti-unstoppable option, costing you 0 energy points on your armor, maybe allowing for a little more build diversity. And since Leviathan's Breath basically has unlimited range, you can use this weapon safely and efficiently from the back line. One last pro, this is a solid gambit weapon. It hits hard enough to drop tanky major targets very quickly. It works very well in the boss fight against the void shielded envoys, and it is a guaranteed one-shot kill versus enemy guardians. Head, body, arm, pinky toe, it doesn't matter. One fully drawn arrow is all it takes. For some drawbacks, this weapon is so slow. You need both time and room to use Leviathan's Breath effectively. Pulling back an arrow takes forever, and the sluggish handling makes swapping on and off this weapon feel very clunky. So this is not a weapon that you can just whip out real quick, fire off a quick shot, and carry on. Leviathan's Breath is also going to limit your mobility when using it. Not in the sense that it's going to make you move slower, but your vertical mobility. You can draw this bow and then jump and fire. But if you activate your double jump, the draw is going to cancel. So unless you're running a Top Tree Dawnblade Warlock or Wings of Sacred Dawn, for all practical purposes, this bow is basically unusable from the air. The damage could also be a little bit better. The single shot damage is good, and we do have okay sustained damage, but it's not exceptionally strong in either category. Lastly, this weapon is using both your exotic slot and your heavy slot, which can limit your loadout. And with the wide variety of strong heavy weapons that we have, both exotic and legendary, Leviathan's Breath has a lot of competition. In the right situation, it could be a good pick, but it's certainly not going to be a great pick for every situation. But let's move on to the PvP section, and while I don't have a whole lot to say about this bow, we'll cover it real quick and then get things wrapped up. Alright, as always, starting out with our damage numbers. Leviathan's Breath will deal 548 points of damage on a perfectly drawn crit, and 343 points of damage to the body, both resulting in an easy one-hit kill. An overdrawn arrow will score 479 points of damage on a crit, and the same 343 points of damage to the body, still getting the job done. If you simply tap fire an arrow though, you can do as little as 91 points of damage on a crit and 57 points of damage to the body, so don't do that. Looking at the blast created by the arrow, we're looking at a total of 100 points of damage. So the blast damage alone is not enough to deliver lethal damage on a guardian at full health. but that knockback effect still applies here in PvP, similar to something that you might see from Tractor Cannon. So while the blast damage can't down a Guardian, you could always knock him off the side of the map. Against a Guardian in a roaming super, a perfectly drawn crit will deal lethal damage. An overdrawn crit will deal lethal damage. A perfectly drawn body shot will deal lethal damage, but it does need that blast damage to help it out. An overdrawn body shot is not going to deal lethal damage, so look out for that. Performance-wise, there's really not a whole lot more to touch on that we didn't see in the testing. It's a one-hit kill as long as you don't accidentally puke out an underdrawn arrow, which I mean is good, but not at all unexpected coming from a single-shot heavy weapon. The unlimited range is very nice, and can often take players off guard. And in the right scenario, you could secure multi-kills with Leviathan's Breath, but it's kinda sad to see that the damage from the blast isn't gonna get this done all on its own. And here again, long draw time, so you really need to be aware of your positioning and your surroundings. So when pulling heavy ammo, my thought process is, grab the brick, fall back to a safe distance, then start looking for targets or working your way back in. So if there's a lot of action occurring around the heavy spawn, things could get a little dicey. And it is nice that this weapon does have the ability to deal with roaming supers, which, I mean, a heavy weapon in PvP should, but you have to watch your draw time. While a perfectly drawn body shot does get the job done, if you hold that draw for a little bit too long, that enemy's gonna live, which might not bode well for you. For the verdict, in PvP, if you like this bow, I mean, use it. I wouldn't consider it to be a great option because of the long draw time and the sluggish feel, but it's a guaranteed one-shot kill from range. If that's what you're looking for, I mean, have at it. In PvE, like I said earlier, it's not the best option for every situation, but in the right situation, it can have a place. It's slow, yes, but it does deliver good single-shot damage and does have the ability to deal with unstoppable champions. So if you're willing to sit back a little bit and use Leviathan's Breath as it wants to be used, it can perform. But just keep in mind, this is a weapon where you actively have to play to its strengths to get the most out of it. And if you did enjoy this video, please remember to leave it a like and consider subscribing to the Ironworker Gaming channel to catch much more Destiny 2 content in the very near future. To catch me live, I will occasionally be streaming right here on YouTube. And to contact me, you can look for Ironworker814 on Twitter, join our channel Discord, link will be in the description, or comment down below and I will do my best to get back to you. And with all that being said, I'd like to thank you for taking the time out of your day to check out this weapon review. You guys are awesome, and I will catch you on the next one.